I'll start with the first book that I actually finished yesterday on March 1st, and that was The Big Short by Michael Lewis. If people have watched the movie, the book is fairly similar to the movie. It is all about the 2008 financial crisis. 4 different groups of people who realized there was an issue in the housing market and decided to bet against it. The book is much more technical than the movie, so really gets into the nitty-gritty of what is a credit default swap, what is a CDO, what is a synthesized CDO, all of these financial instruments which were used so that people who were in the finance industry were able to benefit from a financial perspective from betting essentially on the housing market. Definitely simplifying things a lot. It is very technical area, which frankly at this point in time I don't know if I need to get into understanding all of that in a very deep way. One takeaway I did take away from that book is there's a lot of money to be made on the stock market, even if you are doing things which in the long term can cause lots of issues and can essentially bankrupt a system. The people who are working for these different companies were making, millions of dollars a year. I also started learning about options because one of the group of people, they were the ones who worked with Brad Pitt's character in the movie. They were into options trading, and there was one deal that they made, and I think this was around Capital One. Yeah, it was the Capital One deal, and they put in $26,000 into their option position, and they made $526,000. I'm like, whatever that is, I wanna learn about that and I wanna get into that. So that was The Big Short. Overall, I didn't think it was an amazing book. I think the movie is much better because it's very confusing following these different characters and then also trying to teach you about financial systems. I would say I almost wanted a book that was a bit more technical in nature, but then again, if the book was very technical, I probably would have never been able to finish it. So I do think that the way it was written makes it easier to follow, considering it is quite a complex topic. But the movie just helps because you see the different characters. Like when they would talk about Eisman, I was like, oh yeah, that's Steve Carell. When they would talk about Michael Burry, I was like, that is Christian Bale. And that really helped me. I think if I didn't have those reference points, I would find it very confusing to follow. On a similar vein, I am definitely very much into finance books at the moment. Not like personal finance. I'm trying to understand more about the whole industry and how it works. So I just started yesterday reading this book called Trillions: How a Band of Wall Street Renegades Invented the Index Fund and Changed Finance Forever. And this is by Robin Wigglesworth. I have gotten back into investing. It was something that I used to do years ago. And I primarily invest in index funds or like ETFs, but I just wanted to understand a little bit more about why people love ETFs in the way that they do. And I just wanted to decide if that's like still the way I want to go about investing my money. So when I have a question about something, I read a book. So that's why I picked up this. I'm listening to it as an audiobook. It is available on Spotify, so that's where I'm going through it. And I started it yesterday. I'm already 24% of the way through. It reminds me a little bit of The Big Short in that it's following a lot of different people who essentially helped to create ETFs the way that we know it. Kudos to these people, and I give them a lot of credit for what they did, but that's not really why I picked up this book. So I'm kind of breezing through this until I get to the part that hopefully is a little bit more what I'm interested in. Then I also am planning to read The Philosopher in the Valley, Alex Karp, Palantir, and the Rise of the Surveillance State. I'm interested in learning more about AI, surveillance, and tech companies. So the most recent book I read in this sphere was about Jensen Huang, the creator of NVIDIA. I read that in December, I think it was. And I kind of had taken a bit of a break from tech books, but with everything that's going on in the world right now, I am definitely more interested in understanding how these companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and then also companies like Palantir are being used in our system. So I'm going to read this. It has very mixed reviews on Goodreads. A lot of people didn't like it because they were like, you just learn a little bit too much about the author, like his political views, which isn't really why I picked up this book, but I couldn't find a book on palantir and I want to learn about them. So I figured this would be a good place to start. I do find sometimes with these topics, it's probably better to just like read a bunch of articles, but I know myself, I'm not going to sit down and read like 30 articles on palantir. So I feel like I should just read a book, and then little things that like spark my interest, I'll then go and find articles about those topics. And then this one is like a maybe for me, but I'm going to try it. I have a 7-day hold from my library, and this is The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman. So he's a co-founder of DeepMind. I just listened to the beginning, and it already kind of got my interest because, first of all, the introduction was read by AI and was written by AI, and that already got me thinking because it didn't sound any differently than something that would be written by a person, by a human. And he seems to be an interesting person, so I am curious to see what his take is on the new world order, I guess is the way to phrase it. So I also am trying to read more fiction. I thought I was in a fiction mood finally, but I feel like I'm still in a nonfiction mood. So I have 2 works of fiction that I am like interested in reading, but we'll see what happens with that. They both are somewhat classics. So the first is Jane Eyre. I read this book years ago. I remember I always liked it, but I wanted to reread it. I'm interested in reading something about a woman who doesn't really have a lot of options in life and sort of makes the most of her situation. And this is the first book that I thought of. I'm really struggling recently with like this feeling of ingratitude, or like I feel like I'm not grateful enough for my life and for all of the ways that I've been blessed. So I'm trying to read books that sort of change my mindset from, I guess, a place of entitlement to a place of gratitude. So anyway, this is a book that I thought of that I remember reading this and thinking, she is going through such a hard time, but she's just still so positive and just like takes it all in stride. So that's why I'm reading this book. And the second one is The Plague by Albert Camus. I have read a lot of Camus' work, like a few, I shouldn't say a lot. I have been wanting to read this one for a while. During the pandemic, everyone read it and it just felt a little bit too close to home then, so I didn't. So I wanted to try and give it a go now. I started it and it is exactly what I imagined it to be. Like, there are all of these rats that are dying and no one really understands why, but then everyone's just like going about their everyday life like, oh, it should be fine, like it's not a big deal, which again felt very much like the pandemic. But I just think I'm interested in Camus, and I would also say Kafka at the moment, because life feels very surreal. Like, Trump just decided to bomb Iran and now it's happening. And then there are so many repercussions of that, right? Like innocent civilians dying, girls being killed at a school, airports being bombed. Like, it just feels like a very surreal world. But then you're still going around and doing your everyday day-to-day thing. Like, oh yeah, someone's getting married and someone's having a baby. And it's all very weird to me. It's just, I feel like I'm having to compartmentalize my life in a lot of ways, because dealing with the trauma of what you're seeing on the news and then just like having to go about and do day-to-day things feels hard. But then at the same time, it feels like you can't just put your life on pause in order to deal with all of the crazy things that are happening. So I'm just curious to read books that are dealing with those sorts of situations. I don't want to go all the way to sci-fi, because then you can be like, oh, that's a story that's very different than what is going on now. But Camus does a good job of taking things that are a little bit surreal, but then just making it feel very present and very real to life. So how we actually in a normal society deal with the surreal, that's what his books feel like, or the absurdity of life. So anyway, I'm going to give that a read. I do try to read like religious texts, and recently I've really been focused on the Bible. I think for March I'm going to be meditating on the book of Ecclesiastes, which to me is like the essential work of existentialism. People don't think there's existentialism written in the Bible, but there very much is, and it's all in Ecclesiastes, or it's mainly in Ecclesiastes. It starts like meaningless, everything is meaningless under the sun. And I'm like, yeah, that's very much how I'm feeling right now. So Ecclesiastes, not really a book. It's like a book of the Bible, but that'll be another one that I'm gonna focus in on and like really drill down on. So anyway, that's my pretty short March TBR. I'm sure I'll find more books throughout the month that I pick up that are interesting to me, but those are the ones that I have my eye on right now. And I would love to hear from people what they plan to read this month. Thanks so much.